Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paradox that bridges the gap between modern biomechanics and pure artistic intuition. It's a look into the founder of breathed movement, brought to us by Kinexa Formation and Dr. Christophe Delong. Now imagine if the ultimate truth about how our core muscles actually operate wasn't discovered in some high-tech sports lab, but over half a century ago by an artist on a wooden dance floor. We're going to see how a modern dance pioneer intuitively mapped out our incredibly complex muscular systems decades before medical science could even prove her right.
Okay, let's dive right in. To really grasp this amazing intersection of art and science, we're leaning heavily on the recent analytical work spearheaded by Dr. Christophe Delong and his team at Kinexa Formation. What they're doing is honestly remarkable. They're taking historical, artistic movement practices and putting them under the rigorous microscope of modern biomechanics and physical therapy. So they aren't just looking at how a movement looks on the outside, they're measuring how it fundamentally works beneath the skin. It's providing this modern, empirical validation for an artistic method that was developed entirely by feel, observation, and just sheer genius.
So I want you to do a quick favor for me. Wherever you are sitting or standing right now, I want you to tune into your physical body. How's your posture? And more importantly, how are you breathing? Are you taking shallow little breaths up into your chest? Is your core totally relaxed? Or is it rigid and tight? You see, we often treat breathing as this entirely separate function from our physical movement, like we breathe to get oxygen and we use our muscles to move. But this next insight completely shatters that separation, and it takes us straight from your current posture right to the heart of the 20th century dance floor.
Just look at the sheer intensity of this physical pose. This is Martha Graham. Between 1894 and 1991, she completely revolutionized modern dance. But she didn't just invent new choreography, she practically invented an entirely new physical language. Graham built her whole artistic movement on one profoundly simple yet totally revolutionary premise. Human movement, at its most authentic, is a cycle of respiration. She realized that movement doesn't just happen while you breathe. Authentic movement flawlessly mirrors the breathing cycle itself. It's a constant, tireless cycle of contraction and release. Decades before we had the fancy anatomical imaging to prove why this was so incredibly effective, Graham just understood it inherently.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of this famous Graham technique into its two core phases, because this right here is where the absolute genius lies. Step 1. Contraction. Think forced expiration. It's sharp, sudden. You expel the air. You aggressively engage your abdominals and hip flexors. It's a powerful, grounding, inward pull. And then comes step 2, release. You take a slow, deep, diaphragmatic breath. As the air physically fills your lungs and pushes the diaphragm down, it creates this natural, expansive extension of the trunk. The spine lengthens, the chest opens, the energy just flows outward. Contraction, tight, forceful, exhaling. Release, expansive, controlled, inhaling. It is literally the physical manifestation of breathing.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa Formation are measuring today. We're pivoting now from the artistic dance floor over to hard, undeniable biomechanical science. Look at the intricate weaving of the abdominal wall. What Graham simply called contraction and release translates directly into the activation and relaxation of the transverse abdominis. That's the deep core muscle that wraps around your spine like a corset, and it works in perfect tandem with your diaphragm. Modern science shows us that when the diaphragm moves, the deep core absolutely has to respond. Graham obviously didn't have this exact anatomical map, but she felt this muscular truth in her bones.
So the crucial point here is how Kinexa Formation defines this phenomenon today. They call it the stability cylinder, or the cylinder distability. In strict biomechanical terms, that artistic cycle of contraction and release is actually the perfect alternation between transverse activation and controlled release. I want you to think of your core as a literal physical cylinder. For it to function correctly, it can't be locked in place, but it also can't be entirely loose. It has to operate as a dynamic, breathing cylinder that pressurizes and depressurizes to create movement. This is the exact intersection where Martha Graham's artistic intuition perfectly aligns with Dr. Delong's modern physiological science. To really grasp why this stability cylinder is so vital, we need to look at what happens when it fails, and it actually fails in two distinct, completely opposite ways. On one side, you have the rigid trunk. This is someone who is constantly contracted, always bracing their core. The result? They completely lose all mobility. They end up moving like a block of wood. On the opposite side, you have the unstable trunk. This is a core that's constantly released and totally disengaged. The result here? A complete loss of stability. which leads to poor posture, back pain, and a huge vulnerability to injury. Both extremes, too tight and too loose, are total physical failures.
So if a rigid trunk and an unstable trunk are failures, what does success actually look like? Well, according to both Kinexa and Graham, true mastery resides in one specific thing: the quality of the transition. True biomechanical mastery is not about holding some static, perfectly flexed pose. It is all about the dynamic, controlled, and fluid transition between tension and relaxation. It's having the ability to contract powerfully when you need to and release fully when you need to, seamlessly linking those states together just as naturally as an inhale links to an exhale. That dynamic transition is the very definition of a healthy, functioning human body.
It is honestly breathtaking to realize how perfectly Graham's intuition prefigured our modern understanding of the human body. In her 1991 autobiography, Blood Memory, she wrote a line that perfectly encapsulates everything we've just looked at. She said, "The body says what words cannot express." She couldn't use clinical terms like transverse abdominis activation or diaphragmatic pressure dynamics because those simply weren't her tools. Her tools were muscle, breath, and space. Yet, through her art, her body was expressing the exact scientific truths that researchers and doctors are painstakingly mapping out today.
Which brings us to our final thought. We've seen how a dancer essentially discovered the stability cylinder and how Kinexa formation science ultimately validated it. But knowledge is only really useful if it changes how we operate. So I want to leave you with this challenge. How does your movement breathe today? The next time you reach for something on a high shelf, or bend down to pick up a box, or even just sit at your desk working, pay attention to it. Are you rigid? Are you unstable? Or are you dynamically transitioning between contraction and release? Your body has a language. I think it's time we all start listening to it.